You're watching Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm Frank Morano. Well, tomorrow the Federal Reserve is meeting, and apparently all indications are there's a pretty good chance they might look to cut interest rates again. And for those of you keeping score at home, interest rates are historically at a pretty low level. Is this the right move? What does it mean for the country? What does it mean for the economy? Most important, what does it mean for you? Those are a few of the issues we'll explore with George Selgin. He's a senior fellow and director of the Cato Institute's Center for Monetary and Financial Alternatives. Mr. Selgin, what's your take on what the Federal Reserve seems poised to do tomorrow?
I think it's pretty clear they're going to cut 25 basis points. That's 0.25%. They've been more or less indicating that that's their likely cut for some time, and they have reasons for not wanting to go much further. One of them is that they don't want to appear to be caving into President Trump's tweets.
But isn't that what they're doing?
No, I don't think so. No, the 25 basis point cut has been in the cards for some time. And it's a reaction to a bunch of things that the Fed's concerned about, especially the trade situation. So they've been talking about it for a long time. President Trump has, on the other hand, suggested that they go down to zero or something even deeper. But I think that they will probably be conservative, both because their numbers don't justify bigger cuts, and because they don't want it to look as if they are just yielding to pressure from him.
Oh, so what are the economic implications? Let's start with the stock market. We have a lot of folks that watch this show that have money in the stock market, and a lot of folks that have money in their 401k or a Roth IRA. How do you think the stock market's likely to react to tomorrow's news?
I don't think it'll react very strongly. I think if they cut less than 25, that is, particularly if they didn't cut at all, I think you would see a strong reaction on the stock market, mostly because they've been expecting a 25-point cut. Obviously, if they cut more, you could see a much more exuberant stock market, but that wouldn't necessarily be a good sign. It would be a sign that people think the Fed is making life particularly easy for asset markets. But in the long run, the Fed has to worry about consumer price inflation, among other things. And that's why I don't think it should be doing things just to boost the stock market.
So in the grand scheme of things, from the last 100 or so years that we've had a Federal Reserve playing a role in setting the prime interest rate, interest rates are already, even before tomorrow's anticipated cut, correct me if I'm wrong, historically, they're already at a pretty low level, aren't they?
Well, they're already very, very low compared to before the crisis. They're still well above where they were for several years after the subprime crash. The problem is that every time they get lowered some more, the Fed loses some of its ammunition, so to speak, and it has fewer opportunities to stimulate the economy, at least using its typical way of doing that. So there is a lot of concern about cutting the rate, but the fact is, wherever the rate is, if the Fed needs to cut it, it's going to cut it. Otherwise, we're going to have big problems right away.
In addition to the Fed losing its arrow to fight off the potential villain of a slowing down economy, one of the other criticisms that I hear from people that oppose another rate cut is the fact that we could be creating a bubble here. People aren't going to get money, keeping their money in the bank, so they're putting it into assets, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate. We've had the stock market bubble, we had a real estate bubble. Some people have said that these near zero interest rates are in danger of creating an everything bubble. What do you say to that?
Well, no, unfortunately, it's true that under certain circumstances, under more normal conditions, the Fed taking interest rates this low would represent a recipe for major asset bubbles. It's true. But the fact is that these days, these low interest rates don't signify very easy monetary policy at all, and that's the problem. Policy isn't very easy, yet interest rates are low. Then that means that the Fed can't ease up that much more before it gets to zero. But I think that you hit the nail on the head in talking about the twin dangers of causing a recession on one hand and causing an asset price bubble on the other. And I think that 25 basis point cut is as good a guess as any about where the Fed needs to steer if it's going to avoid both of those things.
You know, we have a lot of viewers to this show who remember what it was like to have a savings account, and after you worked and saved your whole life, be able to, in your golden years, maybe even live off your interest in your savings account. Those days are long gone. Isn't this rate cut just another kick in the shins to everybody that's a saver? Doesn't this just promote more borrowing instead of saving?
Well, it would be nice if the Fed could keep rates high all by itself without causing a crunch. But the problem is, it's not alone in setting, it alone doesn't determine where rates need to be in order for us not to go into a recession. There are bigger forces at work that are driving world interest rates down. It's not just the United States, after all. And other countries have lower interest rates presently than we do. The problem is the Fed can't buck that trend. If it tries to keep its own policy rates high when world rates are tending to go low, it's going to over-tighten, even though it's still not charging absolutely high rates. And we're going to feel the pinch. So it's just a matter of the Fed is not, in this case, the dog wagging the international interest rate tail. It's more the other way around.
Well, Mr. Selgin, thank you for the insight. We'll watch what the Fed is going to do tomorrow, and we hope you'll come back soon and give us some more of your analysis.
I'd love to. I'll go back to work and think of some good stuff to say next time.
Thank you. That's George Selgin. He is a senior fellow with the Cato Institute. We have a lot more liquid lunch. Brett Kavanaugh, this controversy is smoldering and it's only growing. The New York Times has a whole lot of egg on their face. We're going to get into that. We'll analyze the situation with Iran. A whole lot happening politically. There's a big election going on in Israel today. We'll try and tell you about that. There's more than we can get to in just a 2-hour program. But don't go anywhere. We'll get to it, as much of it as we possibly can. This is Frank Morano. You're watching Liquid Lunch TV on Newsmax.